call the meeting to order. I'd first like to recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Sunamo First Nations, on which territory we work, live, and play on. For introduction of late items,
Talk to the microphone. Thank you, Chair. So just for agenda item 5A and the two reports, they're going to be introduced by Lynn instead of Richard.
thank you. And just so everybody knows, Richard and I had a conversation about reviewing bicycle lanes and accessibility, etc. We're going to be forwarding you some information, and we'll be putting that on the next meeting's agenda because we had a full one for today and to give you time to review the information. So I'll first go for an adoption of the agenda.
I'll move.
Moved by Richard, seconded by
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn. There we go. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And adoption of the minutes.
I'll move that too.
Thanks, Richard. Seconded. Jocelyn. All those in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so very first thing on our agenda is a presentation with Robin Bull, and Lynn is going to introduce, I believe.
Correct. Good evening, everybody. Through the Reimagine process, we learned about this group called the Adapt Island Society and got familiar with them at a focus group session. And then we've met subsequently with them to learn a little bit more about them, and we thought that this group in particular would be very interested in learning more about Adapt Island. So I'd like to welcome Robin Bull here. I said this evening, I guess technically it's the afternoon. So Robin, welcome. We're happy to have you here tonight to give us a presentation about your society.
Sure, thank you very much, Lynn. So my name is Robin Bull. I'm the treasurer for the Adapt Island Society for Community Inclusion. So the presentation is just kind of give you guys an idea, an overview of what we do. Not a lot of people are familiar with that, and that's partly because we're sort of a background worker, and I'll explain that a little bit. So our mission is to promote Central Island's accessibility to the outdoors, physical activity, and sports by strengthening the existing programs and infrastructure and raising awareness for gaps. We do this by connecting people and organizations. So, for example, we connected, if you're familiar with Power to Be, is an equipment provider in Victoria and Vancouver. They have accessible kayaks and trail riders and things like that. We connected them with the Nanaimo Canoe and Kayak Club, and they donated some adaptive kayaks so they could start an adaptive kayaking program. And that's the type of work that we do. So a lot of people aren't familiar with us because we're kind of a background worker. So we're trying to get out there and sort of let people know that we're out there and we're looking to help make those right connections between organizations and people and everything like that. So some of the projects that we've worked on so far is we initially started our organization by just setting up a lot of the Try It Day sort of events like wheelchair bocce, adaptive rock climbing, and a lot of different little events like that. And through that, we conceived the Outdoor Play Day. And if you're not familiar with the Outdoor Play Day, that was an organization that we partnered with the Nanaimo Child Development Center on at Westwood Lake, where we were able to bring in a whole bunch of adaptive equipment. We brought in adaptive kayaks, we brought in some trail riders, we brought in a whole bunch of different outdoor recreation sort of things for people and children. The focus ends up being children, but it was actually for the whole community. But of course, being partnered with the CDC and it was a new event, people thought it was for kids. So anyways, we were able to organize the first annual Outdoor Play Day and make it an annual event, although unfortunately we have not been able to run it again since there has been park closures since then. So that was sort of where we went from there. And other than that, we set up some other programs. We're working with the Wildwood Eco Forest Institute right now to help them set up a completely adaptive, inclusive field trip program for schools. So like any school in the area can contact them and set up a field trip, and it will be completely accessible and inclusive outdoor education on like trees and nature and things like that. We also connected Pacific Sport with a bunch of sport wheelchairs for the Wheel Kids program, which is an incredible program for inclusivity in sport, and it really focuses on physical literacy, which is really something that's heavily overlooked in my experience in kids that have mobility challenges. My son himself uses a wheelchair, and that was the first program that he ever went to where they really focused on, like, here's how you can throw a ball better. We're not just here to necessarily just have fun, you're also going to learn how to do these sports. So that's a really amazing program. So those are some of the things that Adapt Island has done in the community, and we are looking forward to continue working with the city and all kinds of different organizations and partnering up with the grants or equipment or whatever people need in order to move their programs and organizations forward. So if anybody has any questions for me, that was kind of the overall idea of what Adapt Island does, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any, but that's in a nutshell what we do.
Wow, thank you. I'm incredibly impressed, right? That is so helpful for our community. So let's see if anybody has any questions.
I guess I was thorough then.
And you're working with the city of Nanaimo?
Yes, we are right now. We've had a few meetings with the city consulting on the Westwood Lake and the Wyalana upgrades. Particularly, one thing that looks really good for us right now, I'm hoping, is that we've discussed with the city, they are hoping to have some storage space at both Wyalana and Westwood Lake, possibly for adaptive equipment. And we are connected with the Spinal Injury BC organization and Jocelyn, and also with another organization that have some adaptive trikes and bikes and trail riders that we're hoping to possibly partner up with the city to store at those locations where we're hoping that the organization will be able to sort of service and maintain the equipment. The city can allow it to be accessible to the community, and that might be a really nice partnership for some of these pieces of equipment to get out there and use, especially in high-profile locations like the seawall and Westwood Lake, where people can, when they are out there, they go, hey, I didn't actually realize, that this equipment was available. Even sometimes people don't even know they can ride a bike. My son rides a recumbent bike. He's a wheelchair user and rides a recumbent bike. And a lot of his friends didn't even know they could ride a bike until they saw him on his recumbent bike. So having that equipment out there not only lets the community know that it's there to use, but that they could even possibly do that.
Right. And I have Jocelyn.
Hi, Robin. I am, full disclosure, I think I'm a volunteer for Adapt Island now, but as you mentioned, I think this is just to contribute to this conversation. I think one of the Adapt Island kind of points out a gap in some ways that, there's a lot of lack of equipment, or it's really difficult for organizations to loan and store and host equipment. But equipment is one of the biggest barriers to people with physical disabilities engaging in the community, because you kind of need the right equipment for the purpose. So, very few people have the equipment to take part in some kind of event that takes place on grass, for example, and bikes, recumbent attachments for your chair. Those sorts of things are not cheap, and I'm the one with the hand cycles in my garage waiting for a place to make them available to people with disabilities, and I'm also, one of my hats is Hand Cycling Club of BC, and trying to find ways to make that equipment more available at the community level. So it's just nice to be able to have those glue organizations, the ones that kind of connect and also kind of keep the visibility up of those needs in the community and find ways to partner and effectively kind of share resources. So way to go.
Thank you. And I can't see the gentleman's name who has his hand up.
Oh, Richard.
Oh, I have Richard. Okay, I'll go with Richard first. And then,
I don't see another person with their hand up. Richard's behind this, Richard Harding is behind this box.
oh, that's Richard Harding.
Yes.
Okay. So first I'll go with Richard Harlow and then Richard Harding.
Okay. Hi guys.
See.
So my question is, do you have any equipment for people that, say for instance, who have vision impairments might be able to access some of this equipment, like say tandem bikes or equipment where someone can be essentially led to be able to do a lot of these sports too?
That's a great question, Richard, and thank you very much for it. We don't have any of that equipment available to us right now, and I'll be perfectly honest, like I said, my son uses a wheelchair, so that's sort of where my expertise lies and the gaps that I see when I'm out day to day. One of our board members is a physiotherapist, a pediatric physiotherapist, so she has a little bit more, she notices a little bit more things when they're more related to visual impairment and hearing impairment. So we don't have any equipment specifically geared toward that. I would love to know what kind of equipment you would like to see available. So tandem bikes is a great example. Are there any other examples of equipment you'd like to see in public spaces that would make them more accessible for visually impaired people?
That might take a bit of thought actually, but the tandem bikes was just the one that kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I will bring that back to the board, and we will discuss also Melanie Ryu, our pediatric physiotherapist board director, and she might already have some ideas that we've just neglected to bring forward. So I'll mention that to her as well, that we should look at what we can do in public spaces for equipment for that.
Yeah, I know in more group settings, there are some activities that are more geared towards people with low vision. There's a couple games where essentially the ball has bells in it, so a person with visual impairment can follow where the ball is or the puck is based upon the sound of where the ball is kind of rattling. So that makes it more inclusive there.
Thank you. I'll brainstorm with the rest of the board on what we can look at in these public spaces to be available at the parks and the seawall and Westwood, because it is something that I'm sure Mel has some thoughts on, but we have not specifically addressed yet. So thank you.
Okay, did Richard Harding take his hand down?
I thought you caught me, so I was just going to mention something.
Okay, so Richard?
So, Chair, to the rest of the committee, just want to let you know that we're planning for our May meeting to come back with a draft of what we're looking. We're going to take a report to council to introduce some of the broader improvements to accessibility and parking and new washroom buildings and accessible washroom at Westwood, and we want to bring that back in May to introduce the concepts and get some ideas from the committee, and that fits a lot with what Robin was talking about, was having some storage locations at that kind of facility, as well as with Robin's group. I see there's two other groups I think coming next month that are also linking in on the same topic. So I do see this as a possible subcommittee at some point in time, because there's lots of opportunities to move forward with some of these initiatives and build on groups like Robin's group.
Perfect, thank you. And Rachel?
Hi, is my microphone working?
Yep.
So my comment is to the people presenting today with the work on the projects. The signage with these facilities is probably going to go in as the source facilities go in, but for visually impaired people, putting the signage on the website really clearly would be helpful as well, not just in person. So advocating for that with the projects as well, when you're collaborating across organizations.
Thank you, Rachel. There's actually one really exciting development that we have with the city, where we've gotten some really kind of instant traction, and this sort of relates to that, although I'm not exactly sure how they will integrate low vision into finding the signs. But what my pitch to the city at our original meeting was putting QR codes at the entrances of the park that would have information on the trails and the park and what's available there, and and, you know, what kind of accessibility options there are. And it can also be used for more kind of nuts and bolts things, like if the trail is washed out and you scan the QR code before you go in, you're going to know that there's a washout or maintenance happening on the trail or something. And they actually really, as far as I know, they really like that idea, and they're going to be running a pilot at Westwood when they do the renovation there, and so hopefully that will be useful. They'll be able to integrate that in a way that you could scan with your phone, and then it will be able to be read out via the website if you have low vision. So we actually kind of accidentally did that already. So that's a really exciting development.
Nice. Are there any further questions?
Chair, I can see that Sandra has her hand up.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sandra?
Hi, sorry, I'm having technical issues, so I'm just on my phone right now. I'm going to try and...
So she's iPhone. Okay.
What I wanted to say also was there's not a lot of funding available to children with diverse needs for sporting equipment. So, for example, I was denied access or funding for a bike attachment where my daughter could be in a 5-point harness and pedal but not have the need to steer. And those run about $700 American, and I happened to locate one used, but I know there's a lot of families out there that would love to have access to something like that. So it wasn't until this year that we could go on a family bike ride, because the 5-point harness was a necessity, and sometimes kids are unable to steer in a safe manner, so being attached to a parent bike and having that safety. So that's a piece of equipment that I know is of high value for a lot of families.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And is that, so the piece of equipment you're talking about, the 5-point harness, are you talking about an attachment that attaches to the front of a typical bike, or this is its own piece of equipment, the whole bike?
It attaches to a bike.
I think I know the piece that you're talking about.
Yeah. It's Weehoo. It's Weehoo.
Yes, I do know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm just taking some notes to bring back to the board for when we're discussing these things, what types of equipment we'd like to see. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentation and all the information and the collaboration. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's the Bowen Park Trailway and Utility Upgrade to be introduced by, is it Chris?
Yeah, Chris Lane.
Chris Lane, project engineer.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, so I guess through the chair, thank you very much for the invitation to present on this project. I'll share my screen shortly to go through the presentation that's about 5 to 6 minutes long. But yeah, it's actually quite timely. We had our pre-construction meeting today for the project that is going to get started up soon in May. However, I wanted to, I guess, note that there's still certainly an opportunity for input, consultation, and feedback from this group here based on what you see today and any follow-up, I guess, comments or questions that you have. A lot of the, I guess, civil work associated with kind of the utility upgrade portion and some stabilization works in the park will take the first kind of 3 to 4 months. So we won't really get into the surface works of the trailway and those upgrades and improvements until September or October. So, you know, based on what you hear today and some of the feedback, there's certainly an opportunity to incorporate that into the project yet. And I'm very interested actually in what I just heard about some of the signage considerations for QR codes and other things that may have been overlooked or missed. So I will go ahead and share my screen if I can. Okay, everybody see that?
Yep.
Excellent. So the project in Bowen Park with the trailway and utility upgrade is exactly as it sounds. We have a large trunk sewer that services a good portion of the city running through the park underneath about 90% of the existing trailway there. So the overlay of our utility and the trailway upgrade is actually a really, I'll call it an opportunity, if you would, to kind of do 2 birds with 1 stone and make improvements. So for this purpose, of the presentation, I'll kind of limit, I guess, the information on the utility side. That may not be so interesting, but I'll focus a little more on the actual trailway upgrades for active transportation and other considerations. So just to give you an idea about the Millstone Trunk Sewer, it's a very, very significant gravity sewer utility that the city owns and operates. And the yellow dashed area there is essentially the part of the city that it services. So all the buildings and homes within that area are serviced by this trunk sewer that goes all the way from Brennan Lake, kind of in the northwest end, down along the Millstone River, and then outletting here at the Nemo Harbor, kind of at the mouth of the Millstone there. Now, I'd like to think that the city's been a very prudent utility owner, and we've been upgrading sections of this sewer on a priority basis based on the capacity needs for different areas for development going forward. So these sections here in green are parts of the sewer that since about, I'd say, 2000, we've been upgrading these sections on a priority basis. In 2012, section on Bowen Road was done. 2016, some more pieces. 2017, there was a section on Buttertubs Drive completed. Last summer, we completed a section through the golf course, and this year there's a number of projects. Comox Road was just finished, and as I mentioned, in May we're going to be moving on to the Bowen Park section. So that's kind of the utility component of the project. So zooming in a little bit closer here to our jewel of Bowen Park, just to give you some kind of spatial, I guess, understanding of the project. The line that's shown in red is where our existing sewer is, and the section between these two black dots, which is about 1 kilometer in length, is the section that we need to upsize and make bigger from kind of a 600 millimeter diameter circular pipe to 900 millimeter diameter. Like I said earlier, about 90% of this sewer lies underneath the existing trailway here that goes through the park, specifically from the Mill Stream Parkway all the way southeast, exiting here at the entrance to the Bowen Complex and out at Howard Avenue. So the picture in the top right corner is kind of a standard, I guess, cross-section of the existing trail. About 2.5 to 3 meters wide in places, and it's in fair condition, but again, given the extent of disruption with the utility installation, it was an absolutely great opportunity to not only replace the trailway, but upgrade it and make it more functional. So looking at the trail upgrade, one of the big things, I guess, that I've seen being challenging is the parts and pieces of our infrastructure for pedestrians, cyclists, and other folks. So one of the things that we focused on with the trailway improvement is identifying existing connections to that trailway and where we could connect those with a nice new hard asphalt surface, just to provide that continuity to start getting longer sections of continuous infrastructure. So at the north end of the park, the trail is going to be extended down the Mill Stream Parkway to connect along the West Forest Field here to an existing multi-use path, which will be easily connected into Buttertubs Drive. There's a section of trail in here that is going to be asphalted as well and improved leading up to the Lenhart Bridge. And back in November when we had the presentation to council, there was a question about, well, can we upgrade this bridge as well to make it wider and a little more effective for active transportation? So I believe there's a report going to council to add that into the 2022 budget for consideration as a project. Moving a little further down the trailway here, this section here that goes from the lower trail up to Wakasaya, there's a few small improvements that we're going to do to relieve some steep grades, but nothing extensive in this area. Moving moving forward down here, the next area that we're really going to improve for that trailway is the entrance to Bowen Park here. So I will focus on just a couple areas to zoom in and give you an idea of what some of those improvements look like. So in addition to those connections, we obviously want to make the trail wider and a little bit safer for the active transportation purpose. For the most part, the trail is going to be 4 meters wide in most locations, but there's a few spots where one of the challenges obviously was to respect the existing environment and the mature trees that we have on the existing pathway. So there'll be a few select locations where that gets narrowed down to about 3 meters, but no less than width. It was also decided that it would be a good opportunity to add trail lighting to this system, and that would not only provide some additional safety, I guess, for the corridor and for people traveling at night or after dusk, but it would also really optimize that trailway and give it the opportunity to be used as a bit of a commuting link after hours, so it wouldn't be limited, to kind of 8 to 4 o'clock. Really looking at improving the utilization and the safety through the addition of trail lighting. And the last item here, for the most part, the existing trail is relatively flat, grades of kind of 1 or 2%. But there's a few locations where we were able to take some steep grades out and realign the trailway so that it was just a nice, more comfortable, low-grade feature. So a couple of the areas that I'll just focus on that are noteworthy for the purpose of today are this section here in the middle of the trail that I like to call the feet slope section, as well as some improvements and changes to the entrance to the Bowen complex here off of Howard. So the next slide is just going to show you kind of a zoom in of this location here on the trail. This is a plan view of the new proposed trail, along with a big retaining wall feature that's going to keep that bank stable and keep it from moving. But this is one location where you can see there's a very pronounced, kind of hump in the trailway that was existing, and our new trailway is going to relieve that grade substantially and, for the most part, make things as flat as possible. Again, just to make that comfortable and accessible for all ages and abilities. And the second location at Bowen entrance here, that pathway is going to continue through the disc golf course. The installation of some tactile surface warning indicators here on both approaches to the entrance have been added, and then that pathway will continue through with that hard asphalt treatment all the way down here to the sidewalk, the bus stop, and the crosswalk at Howard Avenue. So this graphic kind of gives you a bit of an idea or a feel for what that improved pathway is going to look like going through our forest. On the public information and consultation side of the project, so what's been completed to date, as I mentioned, it was presented to council, I think, back in November for their awareness and input. We've generated and just recently updated the project website again, kind of going into construction. So there's a good amount of information there that has some background information on the project, as well as any restrictions going forward. And I caught that note earlier about adding some of the park signage to the website so that maybe it can be interpreted a little bit better easily for someone who might be traveling out to site. We also touched base with all the adjacent neighborhood groups to, again, make them aware of the project and just to solicit any comments or information that they had regarding the project. To summarize the input from the neighborhood groups, most were, in favor of the trailway improvements and the lighting, but not at the expense of trees, which goes along with our design intent. And a lot of questions or comments about some existing barred owls there that we've been keeping close attention on, and we'll make sure aren't disturbed during construction. And then finally, like I said, the presentation here today, even though we're starting construction, I'm certainly interested and open to receiving any feedback or comments on how we can make this even better with respect to accessibility from your perspective. So, to summarize the project, we definitely are challenged given the environment and the impact of the community. That trailway is heavily used, as well as the disc golf course and kind of other features within the park. So it's one of the projects I characterize as short-term pain for long-term gain. We've really gone back about 3 or 4 times and ensured tree preservation through both the alignment of that new utility in the trail as well as the construction methods to build it. There is a seismic performance upgrade for the sewer, meaning that once we're done our project, there is right now a spot in the middle of the trail where it's a bit vulnerable if we did get, some ground acceleration or a bit of a shaker. But once we're done our project, that sewer will be upgraded seismically and just protect the Millstone River and environment that much more. So the trailway upgrades, like I mentioned, include widening for safety, some softer grades for everybody, and I think the trail lighting improvement is really going to increase both the safety and the utilization of that. So to finish up, we are starting construction now in May, and I'm going to nudge that September up to October or possibly November to be a little more realistic. But it will be the duration of the summer into the fall, and then I'm hoping that by the end of the year we can turn over a beautiful new park feature to all the city residents and the users who get to enjoy that. So that's my presentation, and I'd love to hear any comments or questions from the group with respect to that.
Thank you very much, Chris. That's great information to hear, and we'll see if we've got questions now. So, whose hand is up? We've got Adrian.
Hi, thank you so much, Chris, for your presentation. This looks great. My family and I are big users of this park. We lived at Howard and Kerr, a block from the Howard entrance from 2007 to 2014, and now we're a block up from the Wall Street side at McCleary and Campbell. So lots of use from our kids who are now tweens, and lots of use from my parents and in-laws and my brother-in-law with his scooter. So it's great to hear about that grade. My husband commutes through that park every morning by bike and also by foot to the post office at Wellington. And so that's great news to hear about the lighting as well. My one question about that specific little stretch of trail is, and forgive me, this might have been changed and I just might not realize it, but is there opportunity to do kind of what's done down at the waterfront where you have a separation for pedestrians and then faster, like somebody on a bike so that they aren't in the same grade? I say that just because I have had experiences walking in the park with my baby, who's not a baby anymore, but where someone didn't realize that I had my baby in a carrier and was obviously getting somewhere in a real hurry in their bike, and I slowed them down and they freaked me out, and I called the city and had a conversation about it, and it was great. I learned that there's etiquette and protocol for walking in the park, but also learned that there is that separation down at the waterfront. And given the widening, I was just curious to know if there's some considerations there.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, and great question indeed. During the, consultation period, definitely some of the feedback that was received did have concerns about that mix of the higher speed commuting cyclists versus kind of the more leisurely pedestrians, and also, comments on like e-bikes and signage and what would be allowed and permitted. So our standard convention for a 4-meter wide multi-use path isn't necessarily to kind of stripe it and provide that designated divide, but one thing that is included in the design for the trailway but wasn't necessarily captured in the presentation was that we will strike sections of the trail that has a bit of a meander or a curve to it, and we will be placing directional arrows to identify that on the right side, cyclists and pedestrians are to be used, and on the left side is the opposite direction flow for the similar, modalities. So we're hoping that that generates that understanding of where I should be. However, if you are going through kind of a longer, straighter section of trail, with nobody that you can see, you may be able to meander a bit and enjoy a bit more of that trail. So that's kind of the design approach for the trail, which one of the intents was to try and keep it as kind of natural as possible. So it folds into instead of just marking everything and having these hard designations, hopefully we can identify that requisite to the users, and it's, largely utilized or people utilize it or in that manner.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That sounds great, and that sounds definitely preferred too, not to have it striped at the highway through there too. And I was excited to hear already talking about the considerations around the signage and making sure that signage is accessible to everybody. So thanks so much. I had an interest in that question, both from having a family member who commutes by bike and also having had that experience. I appreciate your answer.
Thank you. I have Robin, then Richard, then Jocelyn. So Robin first.
Great presentation, Chris. I love the taking out that slope. I know the exact slope that is, and that's going to be so much better. What I was wondering is, do you know, or have you guys put thought into what the actual finish grade is? I think that for what's considered an actual universal access is a less than 5% grade or something like that. Is it a less than 5% or whichever the metric is? I don't remember what exactly it is. Off the top of my head, I think it's less than 5%. Is that finish grade going to be less than 5% or more than that? And if so, if not, is there going to be a part of the trail designated that's a loop or something that's going to be sort of an accessible loop that's notated and documented?
So great question. Thank you very much for that. There are two sections of the trail that kind of pronounced hump in the middle section that you noted, as well as from the entrance to the disc golf course, the grade of the trail does climb. However, we are able to, again, through, once we disturb the area and we reset it with a new trailway, we're able to keep just under that 5% grade in all locations from start to finish. And I guess that kind of addresses maybe not an immediate need for any kind of loop, but what I will say is, since the trail is fairly linear from start to finish, there's a few side trails and access here and there, but it's generally fairly linear, so it's just the location of it isn't really conducive to kind of loops or bypasses or features like that. So.
That's fantastic to hear, Chris. Thank you so much. And so the only other thing about that would be if we are looking at sort of this QR code notation system, to have that actually marked as a wheelchair accessible trail. So I know sometimes it can be really hard to know what areas of town are accessible. So if we could have that notated and documented, that would be an accessible trail. Would be fantastic. You may already be planning to do that, but if not, that would be wonderful.
No, and I think that this is kind of one of the great products of this opportunity and this meeting is that considering that we are really improving the trail with respect to making those hard connections and completing those connections that I kind of mentioned earlier, there is still the idea of introducing some signage. I don't want to call it wayfinding signage, but more improvements to signage along the trail to identify these locations and these corridors and these connections. So that would be an absolutely great opportunity to fold in the accessibility considerations. And like I said earlier, we've got lots of time to do that before kind of October and November, which would be when we do the final kind of cleanup of the project. So if I could loop back into this group and even get some direction to the design phase for that, that would be excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard.
Hi. So I couldn't really tell from photos due to vision impairment. Are these trails all cement or are they like dirt at all?
So the trailway that we're replacing the majority of is an existing asphalt trail, so it is hard surface. It's in reasonable condition. There are sections that could probably do for a little bit of TLC, but two locations that are currently gravel and hard packed, kind of just forested trail area are the connection from the Mill Stream Parkway out through this gravel parking lot to connect to the multi-use path along the sports field there. So that is a treatment that will be improved from gravel to asphalt. And then there's a little kind of a hodgepodge of trails between the Mill Stream Parkway and the Lenhart Bridge, which again is just kind of hard packed forest floor treatments that will be upgraded with asphalt as well. So those are two specific locations that will be improved, but to answer your question, the majority of the trailway is existing asphalt that will be upgraded.
Okay. Follow up on that. In my reading and such, I learned that Oregon has really good examples of like what really good accessible trails look like for someone with visual impairment. And I did some just quick Google searching now to try and look up some of these examples, and it came up with like a PDF of different, well, I found a PDF of different examples and guidelines and such for visual impaired users, but also general accessibility that the city of Oregon has done to try and make their trails more accessible. I thought this might be something that would be really good. I know one thing that that I sometimes face if I'm on like on a trail and I'm trying to navigate without, say, perhaps a guide, is distinguishing between the trail itself and the edge of the trail. So having some sort of like difference in texture for a white cane to be able to tap and feel the ground would be something that would be really important along all the edges where, like, say, the dirt trail is. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll have a look at that City of Oregon document to see if I can peel or pair anything out of that would be applicable to our trailway for an improvement. And the treatment for outside of that new asphalt trail is mostly going to be dressed up with a little bit of a softer kind of mulch treatment. So blending that hard treatment into the forest, not only for aesthetics, but there would potentially be a bit of a, an asphalt lip, if you would, between the edge of the trail and that kind of softer off-piece area. So that would be something that would be constructed, that would be supportive of having that kind of designation of where I am on the trailway.
Okay. Should I email this to legislative?
Yeah, that would be great, and then they can forward that on to me, Richard.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. I've got Jocelyn and then Eileen.
Thanks. It's always great to hear the more parks with trails at a lower grade. I think that's really helpful for a lot of different users. Richard's question kind of answered my question. So I just wanted to mention the issue of the edges of the trail in terms of accessibility. I'm a wheelchair user, and even at a little bit of a grade, I also wanted to ask if it had a bend in the middle, like longitudinally for runoff, just because of that, even with a tiny bit of a grade up the hill, it can be a tough for a wheelchair user to keep straight. And also the question of the edges of the trail, so that nobody can sort of be surprised that they've arrived at it and topple sideways off the trail.
Okay.
Yeah, so the trailway, when it's paved, the ability of the machine to provide kind of a camber, I'll call it, or like a hump, generally isn't something that can be laid with the equipment. So it would actually be constructed with a slight kind of 1 or 2% grade, a very mild grade to the downslope side. And what that will do is then shed that water kind of off the lower area and keep that trail, from collecting water or ponding or being problematic like that. So
For ice and cracking, right?
yeah, absolutely. In the winter, when we do have colder temperatures, but it's generally just a drainage feature, like I said, to keep that asphalt kind of clear and free of any standing water.
Thank you. Eileen?
Okay, my question is not related to accessibility, but it's an opportunity for me to ask. I was going to ask about the lighting. If it's going to be the low-grade light pollution, is it going to be the kind of lighting that doesn't flare everywhere? The kind that just spots down,
Yeah, thank you for the question. I guess there's a few things I'll comment on. Is one, so the lighting that was selected is an LED lighting, and one of the things to control where that light spectrum is directed, it'll be on the one side of the trail. There'll be some foiling on the back of the light so that it won't spread out into the forest, and to the extent possible, it's going to kind of focus on that trailway and really limit any of the overbleed into the environment. So, I mean, depending on the study that you read, the temperature of the light spectrum, usually around the 3,000 Kelvin mark. So, temperatures that are higher than that, which are kind of a cooler, whiter into a blue light, that's where you can get into potentially affecting like that natural circadian rhythm of plants and animals. And obviously we want to improve safety and light the trail, but we want to limit how much that impacts the natural environment. So anyways, to get to the point, we've used a 3,000 Kelvin LED standard that's foiled and kind of directed onto the pathway in order to kind of limit the overbleed and any impact to the natural environment. Yeah, so it'll be kind of similar to the look of the Georgia Greenway, if anybody has utilized that trail. So yeah, we definitely took into consideration the impacts of lighting on the environment while still maintaining the illumination required for the safety and the functionality of our trail standard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And not seeing any further questions, I want to thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of thought that has to go into a trailway, so this is great, and you've got good information to take up with you. And I think Richard's going to forward you on Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah, and through the chair, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I appreciate the feedback, and I've learned something here today, and I think that will just make our trail that much better for everyone.
Thank you. We'll move on then to our Departure Bay waterfront walkway, and we've got Mr. Bill Corson.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking of trails, we have another trail to talk about. So this one's probably not as far as long as Chris Lang's trail, but we have some concepts to share with you this evening, and really look forward to getting your feedback on this. So I have a PowerPoint for you, because we love PowerPoints. And here we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. So just I want to give you a bit of history about the whole waterfront walkway project. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight about the Departure Bay section. I want you to know a little bit about the process we went through with the public in 2016 and 2017 to create a plan that creates a walkway from Departure Bay all the way to the estuary at the Nanaimo River, and that's about 13 kilometers in length. We went through a really large public process. At that time, it was one of our largest public processes, where we had over 2,000 responses. That's now been surpassed by this council's Reimagine Nanaimo process, but it's got lots of great feedback from people, and it helped us shape the design of the trail and the segments that are most important to people, and helped us kind of prioritize investment. And that was adopted by council in 2017. And it has 6 main sections, which are Departure Bay, the Newcastle Channel section, where we have some bits that are already built. Then around LaFale Sun Park, which exists to a standard today, along the waterfront past the boat basin. Recently we built an area around the lands the city bought at Port Drive and out to the NPA Niagara Port Authority terminal, and then the trail would continue down to the estuary along Halliburton and through past Living Forest Campground. So that's the whole project. And in the Departure Bay section itself, as you know, the bit of it's been built and it's very well used down in the bay itself by the Kid Hut, and that was upgraded just recently. And this is to really complete the section from that area of the Kid Hut all the way back to the BC Ferries terminal. And some people may or may not know, but when the Departure Bay BC Ferries terminal was updated, almost 15 years ago now, 20 years ago now, they actually built the trail behind the ferry terminal. So the trail actually exists behind BC Ferries terminal in that yellow line you can see on the screen here. So that's been built. And what's missing is the section from here all the way to Battersea and along to the Kinhut. So that's what the assignment was here, was to figure out how to build that section. And at that time, we were hopeful to build a section of it in 2018 from the end of the ferry terminal, as you can see on those red dots, to the Solaire neighborhood. And we had the design work done for that, and we did some consultation on that as well. And then when we got into actually look at constructing it, we found out it was actually going to be harder than we thought. And that was going to be an elevated walkway, some of you might remember that. And at that time, we had some outside engineers come in and give us some advice on how you could actually build this in a more effective manner. And they came back to us and said, while an elevated option is an interesting choice, it's actually probably better to do an on-beach option using what's called a green shores approach. So actually using the existing beach, but restoring it from an environmental habitat perspective. So Council in 2019 gave us direction to go and do that, and the first thing we wanted to proof out was, is it actually feasible to build on the beach? Because obviously there's concerns that if you have high wave action, will it be eroded? Would it actually hurt the existing habitat? What are the concerns from archaeological perspective, etc.? So that was what we spent the first part of 2019 doing. And then if that were to prove out, then we did what is called a functional design, and that's kind of where we're at today. So this is the length of what we call the project limit. So from the Kinhut back to the BC Ferries terminal along the foreshore. For those of you who know Departure Bay, there's a series of may I call them cliffs, but where the houses up in the Solaire neighborhood are well above the beach there. So the feasibility study looked at, again, tried to answer those questions. What are the challenges and what are the opportunities, and how could this walkway be designed? And they came up with different ways of building on the beach. So there's 3 different options they came up with. And then in the final design, those 3 options, they picked the best of the 3, because each section of the walkway is unique, and they were able to come up with a preferred solution. So one of the challenges, again, like I mentioned, was this whole issue of wave action. So we had a consultant do wave modeling and look at coastal erosion, and they were able to come back and figure out which areas would be most susceptible to winter storms. So the image on the screen is what would happen during a unique event, but one that could damage the walkway, which is a windstorm coming down Howe Sound across the strait through the gap between Newcastle Island and the Stevens Point area, and how that would actually impact the area. So that's kind of the worst case scenario for wave action. And then they gave us some options on how to deal with that. And they came up with this idea of what we call headlands, which are little rocky islands which actually break the wave action up before it gets to the shore. And that's been incorporated into the design I'll show you in a minute. A big issue, of course, if you're going to build on a beach is we know, unfortunately, due to climate change, we have sea level rise. So this was a big question, was, well, how high do we need to build out? Because we want to make sure this is a big investment, that it actually is it's resilient and that people continue to use it in the future, and we don't want to have to keep going back in and raising it. And we decided to choose a 50-year time horizon for sea level rise for two reasons. One is if you built it for 100 years, it would be so high out of the water and scale, it would look kind of strange at this moment in time. And the other reason is the alignment follows the sewer line for the regional district of Nanaimo, and that will have to probably be replaced within 50 years. So we know we're going to have to go back in much later date and replace that sewer line. So at that time, we have an opportunity to raise the walkway if sea level rise warrants it. Another big issue in the area, in one section around Solare Bluffs is there's two issues. One, you have erosion at the toe of the slope. So if you have waves coming into the beach, those can help. Will remove sediments from the shore. From the bluffs, and then they can slough. And then the other issue is just the natural movement of the bluffs, just from Mother Nature's. So the design was able to kind of address what they call the littoral drift. So the shoreline erosion, with having the walkway on the shoreline, actually stops that part of the erosion. And the issue with the sloughing from the upper bank, we moved the trail out in areas where we knew there could be potential hazards. So sometimes in Vancouver, the seawall has to be closed because there's the sloughing, the upper areas of land fall on the trail. So we've designed it so we can actually get away from that. So it's a safe environment for people. And then the big issue, of course, is the environment. So if you're going to cover a beach up, what existing environmental habitat is going to be lost, and how are you going to replace that? And really, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has a no net loss principle, and when you look at Departure Bay, unfortunately, it's lost a lot of the habitat value over the years. And this is a really interesting opportunity to come in and actually restore the beach to what it might have been like, prior to contact with Europeans. So the design team has come up with a very interesting plan that actually provides a whole lot of habitat for fish and for wildlife. So I think when we started this project, it was very much a waterfront walkway project. And I think it's kind of starting to morph itself into this very large environmental restoration project that has a walkway at the back of it. Archaeological is really important. Obviously, Departure Bay was the center of the Sanimo community, and very important to recognize their presence in this area and to make sure that we're respectful and work with them on this project. As part of the project, the archaeologists and one of the Sanimo members walked the beach over a series of days to kind of inspect the area, and unfortunately there's not much left on the beach from those days, but there is a recognition very much so of Sanimo's presence in this area. It's very important. And then one of the biggest issues, well, we've looked at these technical challenges, another big issue is permitting. And so to move this forward, you have to work with a whole lot of different levels of government, and yes, we are government, but opportunity for us to build relationships, and we have to work with BFO and the province, BC Ferries, the Ridge District of Nanaimo, and of course our partners at Sanimo to help bring this forward. So one of the things we had to do in the design was understand permitting, because that permitting directly affects delivery of the project. And there's an issue of something called riparian rights. So the folks in the Solare neighborhood, their properties actually, even though their houses are above the cliff, their property lines run down to the shoreline, and they have a right under common law which allows them to access the water. So in order to move this project forward, we have to work with each of the property owners to work with them on those riparian rights so we can build the project. The province will permit the project without the city having those riparian rights. And so that's kind of all the challenges. And then through that feasibility study, the consultant came back to us and said, you can do this project if you follow the feedback we're giving you, and you should move forward with functional design, which is a little bit more detailed analysis. The walkway itself, this image on the screen shows it being separated. So it's just on Chris Lang's presentation, we had a question about separating the bikes from pedestrians, and the waterfront walkway strategy for the whole 13 kilometers emphasizes the importance of separating pedestrians and cyclists. And so the way it's designed is the pedestrians are on the shore side, on the beach side, and the cyclists are on the land side. And they're separated. The trail is lit, and there's multiple access points down to the beach. In this picture, you can see what we call one of those headlands, rock headlands, which actually helps break up the wave action. And by doing that, it creates opportunities for habitat as well. This picture, it would be from at the end of the BC Ferries Terminal at Northfield Creek. And in this area where I've actually kept it higher, like kind of akin to the Stanley Park seawall, and then it starts lowering down once it crosses the creek. This area of the project actually has a mud flat already, and there's an opportunity to take that existing mud flat and enhance it, so increase the habitat value in that area. This was one slide ahead. So that's kind of the restoration of the tideline, intertidal area there that already exists, and then it heads down towards the shore as you cross the creek. And this is towards the Battersea end. Again, there's those pocket headlands and some people enjoying the beach. We've tried to make it accessible so folks who have mobility challenges can get down to the water, which is one of the challenges in that we don't have a lot of great water access. So this project provides numerous access points along the shoreline where people can get down to the water. And here's people enjoying the walkway. So the functional design, what we were able to do then was take that work and get into some more specific designs to help us with costings and understand exactly how much land we would need for the project. So what I have here are a series of functional designs. So this is not, when Chris Lang was showing his plans, he's quite into, he's at the tendering stage, he's got designs. These are, I'd say, still conceptual. And but yeah, I'll take you from north to south, starting at the Kinhut. So we have Christie Street and Randall Road and Battersea are existing city streets, and what we do is we turn them into slow streets, so they're safe for pedestrians and vehicles, and this is for residents only. So we wouldn't be attracting the public down here in their vehicles. It's a resident-only road, but much wider sidewalks and pedestrian paths for people to get to the main walkway. We'll just head down the pathway here, and then we at the end of Battersea is where the walkway starts. It becomes separated with the bikes and the pedestrians. In this one, you can see those three headlands that break up the wave action, and the sandy beaches that follow. Throughout the design, we have viewpoints so people can get out and look at the ocean and the beach. Some more headlands as we head down. And I'll just go into, there's a few more viewpoints for folks. We have some connectivity back up into our neighborhood, which is important. And then we're going to cross the Northfield Creek and tie into the existing trail at the BC Ferries Terminal. So that's kind of where we're at with the stage of the project. We plan on actually doing an official launch of this project with the public in mid-May. Unfortunately, the media got a bit ahead of us this week on it, so I was hoping to do an official launch middle of May, where we're going to have some videos and fly-throughs and more detailed functional design, and we'll have a survey up for folks to get some more feedback. We certainly always heard that through the Reimagine Nanaimo project that this is still a priority for people. We generally hear this is one of the top projects that people are interested in. And again, we're still very much at the functional stage. What we're hoping to do is get feedback from the public right now in May and June, and that gives us a chance to go back to council to seek direction on how if council wishes to proceed. If council did wish to proceed, this would require a referendum, so it would have to go out to the general public to have their say if they're interested or not. That's where we're at. On this last slide, I just have kind of the next steps, kind of what we're doing right now. So I'm presenting this project to the committees in the city and working with our partners at SNAMO and reaching out to our other government partners for the approval process, just to kind of bring people along. But then, like I say, get back to council summer or maybe early fall, and seek direction at that time if there's interest in moving forward with this project. So for your committee, really interested in getting your feedback. Again, we're still at the conceptual level, so any feedback you give, it's very easy for us to incorporate now. And if this project does come to fruition and we get into that design work, our great engineers, people like Chris Lang, will then start getting to those detailed designs, and we'll probably, I'm sure we'll be back out to this group to solicit your feedback at that time as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Corson. So we'll open this up now to questions from the committee. Just give me a moment so I can see raised hands. And the first one I have up is, I've got Richard and then I've got Sarah. Richard, you're on. Did you have...
All right, thanks. Hi, I have a couple questions. So, because of the partnership with Sunumux, I'm kind of curious if there's going to be any plaques that are going to be put up to talk about, say, the connection with the First Nations community, what was there before, any sort of historical plaques, and to make that accessible, having QR codes that would tag to a screen reader friendly kind of version. And I have a second question in relation to the wheelchair accessible beaches. Is there going to be a wheelchair ramp that goes all the way down to the shoreline itself, so a person in a wheelchair can actually dip their feet in the water itself there? Because I know that's been something that a lot of people have been asking and requesting from the local community here for quite some time.
Thank you, Richard. Good questions. Mr. Corson.
Great, thanks to the chair, to Richard. Yeah, really good questions. Yeah, so the interpretation of, for us, departure of age is such an important area for Samoa, so I anticipate there will be, I think this project needs to celebrate their presence in this area and how important it is to them. Yeah. And I think there will be interpretation. I'm a little reluctant to use the word interpretation because I think we want to celebrate Samoa, so, but it'll definitely, that's the whole idea, is to let people understand the importance of this area. We haven't gone to those detailed discussions with Samoa yet, but I hope there'd be art, I hope there'd be the history, all the messaging that can be shared. And I really like your idea of making sure it's accessible for everyone to understand. So QR codes is a wonderful idea. And then the wheelchair access to the beach is great, and that's why we're here today, is to get that feedback. Certainly the idea is to get people to the beach, and I think if this project proceeds, then I think we'd want to make sure that we actually have proper access into the water, and I'll leave that to the designers to figure that out, but that's a very important feature because it's so possible to get down to the existing beach, right? It's not, there's a real opportunity here to create multiple access points, not just one, right? I think we have, I was saying the other day, really it's kind of like a new park because we have multiple places where people can access the water, which is quite exciting. Did I answer your questions, Richard?
Yeah, and I believe if you want to follow up, I believe Parksville has a wheelchair accessible ramp that is being utilized along the beaches there. So touching base with Parksville would probably be a great idea.
Wonderful idea, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Sarah?
Yeah, this looks really fantastic, and I understand you mentioned it's at the conceptual stage, and so also that because of that, it's a great opportunity to offer some feedback. So one of the thoughts I had was around facilities, like if there's any kind of change room or washrooms, that they be accessible, but that they all be accessible, not that there's a single-use one that is wheelchair accessible. Oftentimes it's that's the case, and then that also is named as the all genders washroom or gender neutral change room or washroom. So the suggestion that I'm making is that you might look into how other cities are addressing having an all gender space or a gender neutral space for washrooms or change rooms, any kind of public facilities that are being built along the way, that would allow for there still to be the women's washrooms and the men's washrooms, but then also the gender neutral washrooms or all genders space. Yeah.
Thank you.
To the chair, so thank you for the feedback. And when we did the overall strategy, facilities was one of the top issues, right? Well, washrooms is a big issue when people are out enjoying the outdoors, and that's some really great feedback, because that's why we're here. Yeah, so the idea was to certainly try to provide more washrooms. I think the idea of making sure they're inclusive is where we need to be this time. So thank you.
Thank you. And then I've got Deborah and then Sandra.
Sorry if I missed it in the presentation. I'm just wondering about lighting, specifically lighting to increase safety, specifically safety for, individuals using, but also women, seniors, vulnerable people, just being able to utilize it when, lighting might not be so good.
Yeah, through the chair to Deborah, thank you, and I did not mention it, but there is lighting, so good. And I don't think I can talk as detailed about lighting as Chris Lang can, but maybe we will have a lighting, if everything goes conditional, if this project were to proceed, then there's a lighting consultant would be on the team who would help deal with that. I think Chris raised some really interesting points about lighting on the Bone Park Trail in terms of kind of making sure you're shading for habitat. I know when we were looking at the elevated walkway, one of the issues was if you have too much lighting near the ocean, it impacts the fish. So for us, this connection, this project is an important connection from an active transportation perspective across the community. And we expect in the winter this to be a well-used route by people at night, or in the morning going to and from work, or just people out recreating. So it does need to be lit from a safety perspective. Thank you for catching up.
Thank you. And Sandra.
Yeah, I think this is great. I'm really excited about this. So, but I think it's going to be really well utilized. And I don't know if I missed it in your presentation, but about parking. And usually when you add an accessibility trail, there's an increased use of accessibility parking spots. And so I'm also curious about that as well, and if there's going to be additional parking built in.
Thank you. Mr. Corson.
To the Chair, Sandra, thank you. Great question. Yeah, so other than washrooms, parking is the number 2 issue. So that is an issue, something we need to work on in this project. So you really have 2 endpoints. You have the kind of Brecken boat ramp, which will be one natural ending at the BC Ferries Departure Bay terminal end, and then we have the existing Departure Bay parking area, which we know is very well used, and can be hard to find a space. So that is again something we need to do a bit more thought on. We have the Departure Bay Activity Center across the way that we could do some stuff with, but again we haven't really got into that level of detail. I agree with you. I think an amenity like this for the public to use will be very well used by people of all levels of ability, whether it's mothers with babies and strollers, or folks with wheelchairs, or just other folks with limited mobility. It'd be the flattest place in an island to walk, so it'll be very popular.
I would like to say something. It's not just women that use strollers.
Oh, no, I use them all the time myself. Sorry, yes. Sorry, no, but my apologies.
And I do have Robin.
Hi, Bill. A great presentation. Really excited about this project. And this is sort of, it's a thought that I'm having as we're having this discussion. So forgive me, it's not super well fleshed out. But I'm thinking that there's a really exciting opportunity with these park renovations and all these new facilities when we're talking about washrooms, that there are very, very few facilities anywhere that have an adult-sized changing table. And I know the only place that I know of is the aquarium in Vancouver that has an adult-sized changing table. And this would be a huge asset to anybody who has a child or family member that weighs over like 50 pounds, that can't toilet themselves for whatever reason, or they need special facilities that they just are not available in the public. I know my son has had surgery where he had to be laying down for like 10 weeks and couldn't stand afterwards, of course, after laying down for 10 weeks. And so, you're in a brief for that time. And so you can't go anywhere. You have to plan your trip. Your trip has less than 2 hours because what are you going to do? You have to use the bathroom. So I think there's an exciting opportunity even to just run like a pilot in one facility of trying an adult-sized changing table, seeing what that looks like. I don't know what kinds of issues might arise from it, what problems we might find, and what works and what doesn't work. Vancouver Aquarium, again, is an example. So that's an indoor space, so I'm sure it's a little bit different. But maybe we could run some kind of a pilot of an adult-sized changing facility, because it's something that's lacking in all communities across the board. They don't even have one at the Victoria General Hospital. So it's an exciting opportunity for something that would be really valuable to the population that does need that.
Thank you. And I've got Richard and then Rachel. Richard.
All right. One thing that I don't think was mentioned, for people with a low mobility, having like places to sit down is definitely a very important thing to have. Like maybe something like every 100 yards along this pathway would be really valuable. I mean, it's going to be great for people to just enjoy the water too. Benches and seating, where's that in there?
Thank you. And Rachel? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, we do actually, and again, I glanced over that, but that is an important feature of this walkway is lots of rest places for people. I'll say, as you remember, it's separated from the pedestrians and the cyclists, so along the pedestrian route we have benches a set distance every way along so that people can have a break if they need it. So yeah, thank you for raising that. Cool.
Rachel?
There is the possibility to combine disability access washrooms with gender-neutral washrooms. I know one of the Vancouver Public Library locations, instead of making, a common entrance and then stalls, they have every single toilet with a big wall, like a big door, rather. So it just has a sign of a toilet, it doesn't have a gender. You go in, there's a change table on the outside. There's a toilet, there's the accessibility bars on the wall, the toilet paper is at easy reaching height, so you don't have to the paper towel. So there's a sink within the stall so that they're totally accessible. So if two wheelchair users are there, one doesn't have to wait for the other person to finish using the toilet. And gender diverse people don't have to wait for someone to come out of the disability washroom to be able to use the toilet with dignity. So having it built like a regular washroom with all the stalls, the doors to the outside, is just the same as any other washroom where each door faces the outside and they're not connected on the inside.
Thank you. And Adrian?
Thank you. I just had a question around transportation. You mentioned about the regional district and the sewer line in the 50 years. I think that the bus route, the RDM bus route for this section is all one bus, but I'm wondering if there's been any consideration given to, as the walkway expands, expanding or working alongside that bus system to increase accessibility and use.
Point.
Yeah, through the chair, Adrian. That's a really great point, and I think right now, because of the walkway, the way it's built, we have sections of it built in different areas, but it's not connected. And I think that's kind of the goal of our whole implementation plan is to connect it, so that then you have these multiple access points, and it makes transit so much easier to use when you can hop on and off. I think as we start making connections, and I think we've alluded to on this call that, you know, the number of people using will be quite significant, and I think that will actually help drive transit as well, and to bring people there. So I think that's something, once, again, if this project were to proceed, then we can sit down with the RDN and have a conversation about their routing and their schedules. And I know they're always looking for customers, so if we can provide them with more people on the routes, I think that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
That's great to know, and I ask because I think my kids have done pretty much every after-school program the City of Nanaimo offers, and summer camp program, spring break program, and their daycare was really big too on transit. You know, it included a bus pass. They take transit everywhere, and they go to every city park, every beach that where the city has facilities, and they know every bus route in the city and how to get to every park more than we do, and you know, to build off of that and to make it easy access. So I think about myself, and I might not walk the whole 13-kilometer stretch there and back at some point, but I, you know, definitely want to encourage, you know, not driving if I could. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, we will close that one and move on to Reimagine Nanaimo. And I have Karen is with us to talk about our Reimagine Nanaimo, our update on our indicators.
Through the chair, it will be Lisa actually who's
Oh, is it Lisa?
Yes.
And is she on Zoom?
She is on Zoom, yes.
Okay, perfect. It'll be Lisa.
So we will
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Through the chair, I will be presenting tonight a quick change in plans, and I understand that Les will be supporting me with a PowerPoint, and because you have a very packed agenda, I'm going to keep this pretty high level because Lynn Wark, who is also on the Zoom call, will be co-presenting part of this with you, and really focusing on an update to the workshop some of you participated on with us on looking at indicators and targets related to Reimagine, and council's request that we incorporate something called the donut framework of sustainability. So if I could get the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to give you an update on the work that you provided us feedback on with some highlights, and really, again, focusing on the indicators that I think you will be most interested in, or actually that we'd really like your expertise and feedback on. So and then I'll quickly give you a summary and then hand over to Lynn. So next slide, please. Okay, so we had a very successful experimental Miro Zoom workshop. I'm not sure how many hands I can see, but how many of you, I can recognize several of you participated in part or in full, so thank you very much for that. It was an experiment that I think paid off for us, and we're going to try and do that again in the future. So we covered a very complex topic in a very short period of time, and we ended up with a short list of 21 indicators that we could use as a starting point to evaluate our reimagined strategic document. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this, but that's just an example of some of the work that you did using a board called Miro with support from the facilitators and note takers. So that was some of the outcomes that we received from input on one of the rooms, which was looking at community connection and well-being. And if I could go to the next slide, please.
I would like to point something out. On that slide, it wasn't actually screen reader friendly. I don't know if legislative is able to do anything about that.
Well, I beg your pardon, Richard. Did you want us to go back to the last slide?
To save time, I'm just wondering if, like, after the meeting, it can be sent to me or something.
Okay. Thank you.
In all fairness, it's not really legible because there's so much information on it. It was an example.
Gotcha.
However, Richard, we can provide it in a format where you could read it, because it's interesting to see the process that we we went through.
Yeah.
So this is a screenshot of some of the participants. You might see yourself in this screenshot. There were others. So next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to go through the diversity portrait. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so we have, after the work we did with you, we've come up with 5 overall goal areas: healthy, connected, enabled, empowered, and ecological. And these are us taking the donor economics framework, looking at our existing plans, looking at the feedback we got during phase 1 of engagement, and coming up with those goal topics. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So healthy, support well-being for all, and these are intended to be big statements that then get built out with more depth as we go through the reimagine process. Connected, build a more sustainable community. Enabled, promote a thriving economy. Empowered, encourage social enrichment. And ecological, protect and enhance our environment. Next slide, please. So I have just been told that we actually have 21 fast indicators, not 20. Next slide, please. And here is the draft donut that we presented to Council that we created using their input and guidance. And what you see is the social foundations that represent a healthy, connected, empowered, and enabled community where if everybody's needs are met, nobody falls into what's called the hole of the donut. And in fact, what you can, we try to fill that hole with the reimagine and IMO, with the hope that our plans actually, in the next 25 years, help us prevent and avoid people, our community members who aren't having their needs met. And then on the outer ring, if you click again, please, Guy or Calista, we have the ecological ceiling. And click again. And on the outer boundary, here's what we're aiming for is to have everybody's needs met while not exceeding planetary boundaries. So this very colorful donut is our interpretation of the donut economics framework that comes out of originally the United Kingdom, and it's been adopted in Amsterdam, Philadelphia, and other cities. This is our unique take on it for Nanaimo as part of our reimagine process. And you can see those of you who participated in phase 1 of our engagement, what we did is went to the community and said, let's talk about how we live, how we connect, how we move, how we work, and how we care. We use those categories because what we realized is the average citizen doesn't care which plan a policy fits in, as long as it's there to meet their needs. And so asking people to get feedback on an official community plan or transportation plan, they're more interested in things that impact their lives. And so collecting feedback in this way is hopefully going to allow us, when we go through the process, to look at how we align our different policies in a way that makes sense both for us and the community. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, and maybe through the chair, Council Martin, what I'll do is I'll ask, is everybody okay if because Lynn Walk would really like to take a deeper dive into some indicators that are about to come up. So I'm going to go through these more by topic, because I realize with the amount of time on the table, she won't have a chance to go through some of the parks, recreation, culture. So are you okay if I just breeze through these, rather than go through each one?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So these indicators that you're seeing here, you've got in your agenda package, and there are short lists. This is connected. The next one, please. Next slide, please. Empowered. And there are ones, and so what we're going to do is do a deeper dive right here. So actually, if we go back to the previous one, and then these are the ones that Lynn will be walking through with you. Except the traffic injury rate, I think we're going to leave that one with our transportation group. And Lynn's going to talk to you about the ones that relate to the bottom 3 bullets there. So I'm going to hand over to Lynn, and then I'll wrap up a little bit at the end. So thank you very much for your time. Over to Lynn.
Lynn.
Thank you, Lisa. So this is a tricky process, and I'm pretty sure Lisa already alluded to the fact that it's very much a work in progress still, and I think that things will change and shift as we get more input from the community, but we're trying to work within these top 21 right now, and currently we have them falling under the empowered category. So the three specific ones that we're going to discuss are inclusion and diversity, investment in arts, culture, and heritage, and participation in PRC programs and services. So we can move to the next slide. Thank you, and I think this is the one that this committee will be most interested in. We've really begun tossing around what are some of the indicators that we would be using to measure if our services that we're providing through the city are inclusive and diverse. And this is just a few examples. So potentially the number of barrier-free facilities, the number of volunteers, LEAP program participants, we're talking about LEAP tonight as well. How many kilometers do we have of accessible trails? How many inclusive playgrounds? The number of capital projects that we're working on to improve accessibility. And this is a slide where we thought that there might be some input. I'm not sure if we should do that right now or save it until the end of the slide.
I'm thinking perhaps right now, because we could do it topic by topic, right?
Okay, so these are just a few ideas we've thrown around, and we'd like to hear some input from the committee members as to what they think might be a good indicator that we're working towards a community that's inclusive and diverse.
Okay, so let's see who's got the first ideas. Do you see anybody with hands up? Jocelyn.
Hi, it was a great experience to be part of that meeting and discuss a lot of these factors on a level that I don't think I'd ever been involved in before, so thank you for including us. One of the things in cities I've lived in that I often want to see reflected in terms of accessibility and inclusion is that when the city offers grants for parks, rec, and culture or for social planning, that they, for cultural events, that they are inclusive and accessible events themselves. That when cultural events happen in the city, that they are accessible to people with low vision and people with disabilities, and I think that can be hard in a city like Nanaimo, where a lot of the buildings are quite old, and so I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it, but I wonder whether some kind of number of city granted projects for inclusive and accessible recreation and culture. I just want, because I think we grant, there are some great funding supports the city offers to community projects, but if they're not open to people, with barriers like that, I think that can really isolate people with disabilities, so.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and actually your comment makes me feel like it would be a good idea to look at the next two slides and then continue with some input. Yes, because what you're suggesting relates to the next two slides as well. So if we could just move to the next one, please.
Okay, let's do them and then we'll take questions. The next speaker I do have, just so you know, is Sandra. So we'll just wait a few more minutes, Sandra.
Okay, so our next slide is around investment in arts, culture, and heritage. And we do have grants mentioned on this slide, but I think what you're referring to, Jocelyn, is something that we could consider in a grant application process so that events would be accessible and inclusive. We also have some measurement of number of sites on the heritage registry. The value and amount of funds leveraged is something that we're looking at. So for example, we support the Port Theatre, and how much other money are they able to leverage based on the fact that they're getting some from the municipality, for example. And annual attendance at the funded events and festivals, culture facilities, etc., and what sort of investment is taking place in public art and creative placemaking projects. And then if we move to the next slide, I think this is the slide I wanted to get to, because I think we often talk about numbers or volume or things like that when we're talking about what sort of an impact are we making in the community, or what can our indicators be. But we're also in the process of learning about how to do impact assessments in the recreation department right now. And really what that is going out and checking in with the community to find out how is what we're doing, or how are the services that we're offering or the programs that we're offering making a difference in your life. And I think that in combination with some of the more statistical data is a really important element. So, for example, in the community that I came here from, we did an impact assessment on our Summerside Express program, which integrated children with different ability levels into a variety of programs. And when we did the impact assessment, what we learned is that we were having a huge impact, not just on the individuals, but also on their families. And as a result, we decided to not just offer programming in the summer, but to expand what we were offering and to include family members and create a more supportive program that went year-round. So that's just one example. And if we just measured the number of programs we did or how accessible they were, we wouldn't have known how much of a difference we were making in people's lives. Having them feel really supported, having them feel like their children were safe with us, helping them establish a network of other families in the community, that kind of thing. So we can find that information out through things like surveys, implementation of ongoing program evaluations, tracking participation levels, that kind of thing, and asking questions around assessing whether or not our programs are considered equitable, inclusive, and accessible. So this is sort of a more interactive way of gathering feedback from the community. And I think that it was important to get to this slide before we got the feedback. So I think now, that's a very high level, but perhaps that'll help give people some ideas around some interesting ideas.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'll start with Sandra.
Yeah, I was actually going to make two comments, and one is aligned with the impact assessment that you did in your previous role. I know having a child with diverse needs, there tends to be a perception or a stumbling block to sign children up with diverse needs into recreational programs. So an assessment that you talked about, impact assessment, would probably reveal that and see what those barriers are, if they're real or if they're perceived. And it would probably be a really good assessment to do. And then in the first slide, it talked about barrier-free, I think it said facilities, if I was right. But if you've been on that call, you know that people are definitely passionate about bathrooms. So whether that needs to be called out, just because it is such an accessibility area of focus for everybody with diverse needs, right?
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Richard.
So in the empowered section, I think that representation is extremely important when we're talking about offering services and at events itself. For instance, at day camp, I think it would be really important to recognize and see if we can have more representation from marginalized communities. Say, for instance, there are the artists and the murals downtown, the artists that create the sculptures, things like that, like having the artists actually come from diverse backgrounds. So say if we have artists with disabilities, if we have Indigenous artists, the gamut. Same with at day camps, because often if you are a child with a disability, or if you're someone with without a disability, it's good to see these people in the community and seeing that you could actually see yourself in that type of role too. And it kind of also helps remove the ableist idea that, say, disabled people can't do these things.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. Do we have any? Oh, who hasn't? Rachel.
In your impact assessment, would you be collecting people's identifying information, not personal identification necessarily, but would you like to volunteer your sexual orientation or gender identity? Do you identify as Indigenous? Do you have disabilities? Are those, mental, physical, emotional, sensory processing? Would you guys be collecting that data? Because people coming from different backgrounds will experience the program differently.
Thank you. That's a good question. I don't know if we necessarily would be or not. It would depend on what it was we were doing an assessment on. So typically, we would be identifying a need in the community for some kind of program or service, and then we would try and plan that service to help resolve whatever the maybe a social need was, for example. And then at the end of the program, we would do the impact assessment. So we would already have our target group, and I don't know necessarily, depending on the program, whether or not we would be needing to collect that kind of information. All we would need to know is, do we have a good representative sample of people for the purposes of what our program is trying to achieve? Does that make sense?
Yes, for what you're saying, it does. My thought was kind of that you'll also be getting data on who's using your services, and it can maybe see a trend, hey, we have a lot of queer youth or queer young adults with disabilities using our programs and services, or we have a lot of Indigenous people who don't have disabilities using our services. How come we have a gap? How come we don't have Indigenous youth or adults with disabilities using our services? Kind of be able to go from there, collecting data like that?
Yes, that's a good point. We would probably gather that data in a different manner than an impact assessment. So maybe through our Perfect Mind software, for example, or through community surveys, that kind of thing. I do think that that's really good information to collect as indicators as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin.
Hi, Lynn. Just wondering if in this, do you have any plans at this stage for how to handle staff training on things like working with children or adults with disabilities, whether it's low vision or physical disabilities or sensory processing disorders? And if we are planning some kind of training, is it possible to make that training annual so that it's not sort of one and done and forgotten? Because I find that can be an issue where, you attend this really great training, you feel great about it, and it might be 2 years before you use that information and you've forgotten most of it. So is there a plan in place, or can we look at putting a plan in place for staff training on working with diverse populations?
Thank you. Being relatively new here, I'm not 100% familiar with what training has happened over the years, but I do know that there has been training and there continues to be training. But I also know that we believe that workshops aren't the answer, that it's the work in between the workshops that happens that makes a difference. So when we are participating in workshops, we try to incorporate everything we're learning and practice it on a regular day-to-day basis, or operationalize it is how I like to say that. So I think that I can't particularly answer your question right now, but I can certainly look into what we typically do, unless I know I don't want to put Laura on the spot. She's on the call too. She has been here longer. She might be more familiar with the training programs that we have.
Sure, I'll jump in. Yeah, I can jump in if that's okay.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. So, Rachel, our summer leader training, which is annual, that's really great, does do a variety of training. But in other areas of the department, it's definitely something we could look into offering. But summer leader training, which is all of our camps and playground programs, definitely do. Sorry, was that your question, Rachel, or was that Robin?
That was me.
Okay.
Thank you for answering. So I was thinking in particular, like, for an example of something I'm thinking of that jumps to mind is that, like, my son went on a field trip to the pool, the aquatic center, and pretty much nobody there knew how to use the lift, and he basically missed the whole lesson because by the time they actually got him into the water, they were done. So that's the kind of thing I'm sort of imagining, is that proficiency of working with the equipment that's available for people, and having people prepared in advance, especially if the school has already reached out and let them know that a person with diverse abilities is coming, and just maybe a little bit more brushing up on those things.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And in name of time, I'm going to wrap this session up. Lisa, did you want to quickly say something for Reimagine?
No, the only thing I'd like to add, could we move through to the last couple slides, please? And again, okay. So what I wanted to highlight, if you pause right there, is that we will be using the work that you've provided feedback on with the indicators as a means of evaluating what our current policies look like and what we may need to propose, or we will propose changes to in our various policies that exist and new ones that we need to include. And so just flagging for you that in addition to coming back to the committee, we would really appreciate your support as we go back out to the community in phase 2 to say, okay, what are some options for different land uses and also policies that relate to the areas that you're interested in, and they're not just social, they're also environmental. So we're hoping to do phase 2 engagement in June, and going out to the community again with that. So just wanted to flag that for you. And then in phase 3, when we have drafted plans, there'll also be another round of engagement. So it's not a one-shot deal. It's an ongoing process, and we're very glad to have the opportunity to work with you through it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we're at 10 to 6, and the next topic on our agenda is leave. And Mr. Harding, I'm going to go over to you because even though we may have all done our homework, this might be a conversation that takes more than 10 minutes, I'm thinking. Richard's still here, isn't he?
Yes.
I am. Yes, I am, and yes, Chair. I think it is, and it doesn't have to be done tonight. We are going to have another meeting with the committee in May, and it is a very, very, very important program. And as I think even some of the things we talked about tonight, but some of the reimagined goals and other goals that people have talked about, it's one that we really like to be able to have the committee's attention and longer attention for. So if everyone's okay to move it to May, I would sure support that. I think Lynn would support that, and Laura also.
Okay, and then also recognizing that we do have other business, the proposed recommendations from Sarah. And I actually want to have a wholesome conversation about these items as well. So I know we have 2 optional dates in May. I don't know if people want to have 2 meetings in May. No?
Sorry, I don't think Legislative Services has the capacity for 2 at the moment.
Okay.
It would be suggested one or the other.
So, Mr. Harding, will we be able to fit these in? We'll have to.
Chair, we're really encouraging to have one meeting. I think lead services, Sky there, she can comment better. I think the later one, the better for a number of things. Okay. But it depends on how legislative services sees. I think they provided the 2 dates, and it's also what the committee would like. We're ready to go on either the dates as staff, and so are some of the other delegations that we had to move forward to the next meeting. There's just so many groups and organizations want to speak to this group.
This is awesome. The one thing I do see on the agenda though is, did everybody have the opportunity to review our work plan? If everybody can nod, or I'm wondering if everybody's had the chance to review the work plan. Has anybody got any questions about it? Because I'm wondering if that's a motion, we should at least move forward with item 6B, and if I can get a motion to adopt that the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness recommend that Council endorse the 2021 Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness work plan. Do I have a mover?
I'll move that.
Thank you. And seconder? Seconder Rachel. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so that's passed. The work plan's passed. That was good to get there. And then we will look at the other items will be on our agenda for the next meeting. And the will of everybody at the end of May, was it May 28th?
So the two options are May 18th or May 26th.
And Madam Chair, we're good with either date.
I'm just wondering if I can make a comment. This is Sarah.
Yes, Sarah.
Unfortunately, if we miss the item that I asked to have added on the agenda, I'm not going to be able to attend either of those dates. I'll be working, so I'm not able to get out of that work on either of those dates. So that would leave the conversation without me, the one who's trying to, on behalf of Pride, get this moved forward.
Sarah, is there any way to work for you and I to work together that I might be able to represent those items for you?
Possibly, absolutely.
I feel like I mean, I'm happy to wait as well. So, but you and I could work together to maybe, I could help if necessary, or, yeah. But
that's a good solution. I really appreciate that.
Or Sarah, I agree. I believe these are important topics to have conversations on. And it is timing though. We'll probably have a meeting in June.
Yes, so the June.
Would it be okay in June? Would there be anything about pushing this back to June for a fulsome conversation, including you?
Well, I mean, again, that's a bit of a roll of the dice. I have 3 jobs right now.
Oh,
so I just picked up some extra work. So, again, at this point, I was hoping to get this tackled, in April here. So maybe the solution is just to keep it on the agenda for May, and I'll chat with Deborah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Sky, is there anything?
So we do need to select a meeting date.
Oh yes, we do need to select a meeting date. So, what is the will? Should I do it by a show of hands?
Sure, yeah.
So, what is the first one, May 18th?
Yes, from 4:30 to 6:30.
4:30 to 6:30, May 18th, show of hands.
Versus which?
Versus?
Wednesday, May 26th from 4 to 6.
May 26th, 4 to 6, or May 18th, 4:30 to 6:30. Either one.
So the easier way may be to do this would be to see if anyone has a conflict on either of those days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a conflict on either of those days?
Other than Sarah, because we've heard of her.
Other than Sarah, we know.
I have a conflict on the 18th, the Tuesday.
Okay,
Okay,
so that's one.
anybody have any conflict with the 26th? Okay, 26 it is, 4 to 6. I want to thank everybody. This is my first time at chairing this committee, but you guys are really awesome. This feedback has been great and a very popular committee, as Mr. Harding says. There's lots for us to cover, and we'll try and get through everything in the next meeting and not have too full of agenda. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
Take care, everyone.
For adjournment, please.
Oh, move for adjournment. Moved by Sarah, seconded by Rachel. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.